My name is Carlos Mendoza. I'm a construction foreman living in Phoenix, Arizona. And for the last 15 years, I've been building homes across the Southwest, while my heart remained anchored to my family. My wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Isabella, have been my entire world. The reason I wake up every morning before dawn and push through 12-hour days under the scorching desert sun. If you're just starting to watch this story now, take a deep breath, because what I'm about to tell you is something that completely shattered everything I thought I knew about the woman I married and the life we built together. What I discovered changed my entire perspective on trust. And maybe it will change yours too, especially if you're someone who believes that love can conquer any obstacle. Sometimes we think we know the people we share our lives with. We believe we understand their hearts, their dreams, their deepest motivations. But there are hidden truths that only surface when life strips away all our securities and leaves us completely vulnerable. If you're connecting with my story, please hit the like button to support a father who's been through the unthinkable. Subscribe to Carlos's Life Journey channel so you don't miss the continuation of this story. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world right now. It brings me comfort to know which city or country is listening to me share this painful chapter of my life. It all began when the housing market crashed harder than anyone could have predicted. After years of steady work and growing success, construction projects started disappearing overnight. The company I had worked for since moving to Phoenix suddenly had no contracts, no future projects, and no choice but to let most of us go. I remember that Friday afternoon when my boss Miguel pulled me aside after the crew had finished for the day. The look in his eyes told me everything before he even spoke a single word. "Carlos, you've been one of our best foremen for over a decade," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I have to be honest with you. We're shutting down operations for the foreseeable future. I wish I had better news, but there's just no work left." I stood there in the desert heat, feeling like the ground beneath my feet had suddenly opened up into a bottomless pit. 15 years of building my reputation, my skills, my connections in the construction industry, and suddenly it all meant nothing. The economic downturn had swept through our sector like a wildfire, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. That night, I sat at our kitchen table with Sarah, trying to explain what had happened. She listened quietly, her blonde hair catching the light from our overhead fixture as she processed the news. Isabella was upstairs doing her homework, completely unaware that our family's financial foundation had just crumbled. "How long do you think this will last?" Sarah asked, her green eyes searching my face for reassurance I couldn't provide. "I don't know, mi amor," I replied honestly. "Maybe a few months, maybe longer. The whole industry is struggling right now, but we have some savings, and I'll find something else. I always do." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure this out together," she said with a smile that seemed genuine at the time. "We always do." For the first few weeks, I threw myself into job hunting with the same determination I had always brought to my work. I contacted every construction company within a 100-mile radius, reached out to former colleagues, and even considered taking temporary work in other cities. But everywhere I looked, the story was the same. The construction industry had ground to a halt, and experienced foremen like me were competing for the few available positions with dozens of other desperate workers. As the weeks turned into months, our savings began to dwindle at an alarming rate. The mortgage payments on our house continued arriving every month like clockwork, along with car payments, insurance premiums, and all the other expenses that come with maintaining a middle-class lifestyle. I had always been the primary breadwinner in our family, while Sarah worked part-time at a local boutique, earning just enough to cover groceries and incidental expenses. I started taking whatever work I could find. I spent mornings loading trucks at a warehouse, afternoons doing handyman jobs for neighbors, and evenings driving for a rideshare company. The pay was a fraction of what I had earned as a foreman, but I was determined to keep our family afloat. Every dollar mattered, and I was willing to work 18-hour days if that's what it took. Sarah seemed supportive during those difficult months. She would pack lunches for my long days, wait up for me when I came home exhausted, and reassure me that things would eventually improve. She even picked up extra shifts at the boutique, though her additional hours barely made a dent in our mounting financial pressures. But I started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. She became more protective of her phone, always keeping it face down when we were together and taking calls in private. When I asked about work or her daily activities, her answers became increasingly vague. She would say she had been busy with inventory or helping customers, but something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she had practiced these explanations. One evening, after I had worked a particularly grueling day that started at 5 in the morning and ended past midnight, I came home to find Sarah sitting at her laptop in our bedroom. When she saw me enter, She quickly closed the screen and claimed she had been paying bills online, but I caught a glimpse of what looked like a chat window before it disappeared. "Working late on the computer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite the growing suspicion in my chest. "Just organizing our finances," she replied smoothly, "trying to see where we can cut more expenses." I accepted her explanation because I wanted to believe it, because the alternative was too painful to consider. I was already dealing with the stress of unemployment and financial pressure. The last thing I wanted was to start doubting the one person who was supposed to be my partner through thick and thin. But the changes continued. Sarah started going out more frequently, claiming she was meeting friends from work or attending book club meetings. She would dress more carefully for these outings, spending extra time on her makeup and choosing outfits that seemed too elegant for casual gatherings with female friends. When I asked about these events afterward, her descriptions were always brief and lacking in specific details. Meanwhile, our financial situation continued to deteriorate. We had burned through most of our emergency savings, and I was struggling to keep up with even the most basic expenses. The stress was taking a physical toll on me. I was losing weight from working multiple jobs and barely sleeping, and I could see the worry lines deepening around my eyes when I looked in the mirror each morning. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late October. I had just finished a 12-hour shift doing demolition work for a renovation company, and my entire body ached from swinging a sledgehammer all day. When I walked through our front door, I expected to find Sarah and Isabella sharing dinner or watching television together like we used to do when times were better. Instead, I found Isabella sitting alone at the kitchen table, working on her math homework with tears streaming down her face. She looked up when she heard me enter, and I could see the confusion and hurt in her dark eyes. "Papa, where did Mama go?" she asked, in the small voice she had used as a much younger child. "She left right after you went to work this morning, and she hasn't come back yet." My heart started pounding as I realized Sarah hadn't mentioned any plans for the day when I'd kissed her goodbye at dawn. I checked my phone and saw that I had no missed calls or text messages from her. This wasn't like the woman I had married, the mother who had never missed a single school event or bedtime story in Isabella's entire life. I called Sarah's phone immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. The silence on the other end felt deafening, and my mind started racing through every possible explanation. Had something happened to her? Was she in some kind of trouble? Or was there something else going on that I hadn't been willing to see? I made Isabella a quick dinner and helped her finish her homework, all while trying to appear calm despite the growing panic in my chest. My daughter had already been through enough stress watching our family struggle financially. The last thing she needed was to see her father falling apart over her mother's unexplained absence. Around 10 that night, I heard Sarah's car pull into our driveway. I waited in the living room, my hands clenched into fists as I listened to her footsteps approaching the front door. When she walked in, she looked surprised to see me still awake. "Where were you today?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the turmoil inside me. "I told you I had plans with Jennifer from the boutique," she replied without missing a beat. "We went shopping and then got dinner. I texted you about it this morning." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our message history. There was no text about any plans with Jennifer or anyone else. "Sarah, there's no message here. Isabella was alone all day wondering where you were." For just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. It might have been guilt or fear, but it disappeared so quickly I almost wondered if I had imagined it. "Oh, I must have forgotten to hit send," she said with a light laugh. "You know how scattered I've been lately with everything going on." That night, as Sarah slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together all the small inconsistencies I had been ignoring. The private phone calls, the vague explanations, the sudden interest in her appearance when going out with friends. Each detail on its own could be explained away, but together they formed a pattern that made my stomach turn with dread. The next morning, I made a decision that went against every instinct I had as a trusting husband. After Sarah left for work and Isabella left for school, I drove to the boutique where my wife claimed to be employed. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, greeted me warmly when I walked through the door. "Carlos, how wonderful to see you," she said with genuine warmth. "How are you holding up with everything that's been happening?" "We're managing, Mrs. Rodriguez. Is Sarah working today?" The older woman looked confused. "Sarah? Your wife, Sarah? Carlos? She hasn't worked here in over 2 months. I had to let her go when business slowed down. I thought you knew." My legs felt weak as her words sank in. For 2 months, Sarah had been leaving the house every day, claiming she was going to work at the boutique. For 2 months, she had been lying to me about where she was spending her time and who she was spending it with. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, but worse than the deception was the realization that I had no idea where my wife had actually been going all this time. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions and possibilities. If Sarah wasn't working at the boutique, Where was she getting the small amounts of money she occasionally brought home? Who was she really talking to during those private phone calls? And most importantly, who was she with during all those hours she claimed to be at work? That afternoon, I did something I never thought I would do in 15 years of marriage. I parked across the street from our house and waited. When Sarah emerged at her usual time, dressed in her work clothes and carrying her purse, I followed her car from a safe distance. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel as I watched her navigate through Phoenix traffic, heading in the opposite direction from the boutique. She drove to an upscale neighborhood I had never visited, filled with houses that cost 3 times what we had paid for ours. My wife pulled into the driveway of a sprawling ranch-style home with a perfectly manicured lawn and expensive cars parked outside. I watched from down the street as she walked to the front door with the confidence of someone who had been there many times before. The door opened and a man appeared. He was tall, well-dressed, probably in his early 40s, with graying hair at his temples. Even from a distance, I could see that he was handsome in the polished way that comes with money and success. What made my blood run cold was the way Sarah smiled when she saw him, the way she allowed him to embrace her, and the way they lingered in that embrace before disappearing into the house together. I sat in my truck for over an hour, watching that closed door and trying to process what I had witnessed. My wife, the woman who had promised to love me through sickness and health, through richer and poorer, was having an affair. While I was working multiple jobs and sacrificing my health to keep our family afloat, she was spending her days with another man in his expensive home. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. All those months when I had been blaming myself for our problems, wondering if I was failing as a husband and provider, Sarah had been building a secret life with someone else, someone who clearly had the financial stability I could no longer offer. When I finally saw Sarah emerge from the house 3 hours later, she looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. She kissed the man goodbye on his doorstep before getting back in her car and driving toward home. I waited several minutes before following, my mind racing with the implications of what I had discovered. That evening, Sarah behaved exactly as she had for weeks, asking about my day, helping Isabella with homework, and preparing dinner as if nothing had changed. But now I could see through the performance. Every smile felt calculated. Every question seemed designed to maintain the illusion that she was the devoted wife she had always pretended to be. Over the following days, I began paying closer attention to details I had previously overlooked. I noticed that Sarah had new jewelry she claimed was borrowed from friends. Her hair had been professionally styled more frequently than our budget should have allowed. She had new clothes that definitely hadn't come from any discount store we could afford. Most tellingly, she seemed less stressed about our financial situation than I would have expected from someone facing potential foreclosure. While I was losing sleep over mortgage payments and utility bills, Sarah appeared almost serene, as if she knew something I didn't about our future prospects. I started documenting everything. I took photos of the house where she spent her afternoons, noted the times she left and returned, and kept track of her explanations for where she had been. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation for everything I had observed, but the evidence was mounting, and my heart was breaking a little more each day. The most painful realization was that while I had been viewing our financial crisis as a temporary setback that we would overcome together, Sarah had apparently seen it as the end of the life she wanted. Instead of standing by me during the most difficult period of my career, she had begun planning her escape route with someone who could offer her the security I could no longer provide. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was coming to terms with the fact that I had been living a lie for months without realizing it. Every conversation we had shared about our struggles, every moment when she had reassured me that we would get through this together, every night when she had held me while I worried about our future, all of it had been performed while she was secretly building a new life with another man. I started wondering how long this had been going on. Had she met him before I lost my job, or was this something that developed after our financial troubles began? Was I just a convenient cover story while she explored her options with someone who could offer her a more comfortable lifestyle? The questions tormented me during my long work days, making it even harder to focus on the physical labor that was barely keeping us afloat. 3 weeks after my devastating discovery, I made another decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. I hired a private investigator named Detective Rodriguez, using money I had scraped together from odd jobs. I knew it was a risk we couldn't afford financially, but I needed concrete evidence of what Sarah was doing. My heart couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore, and if this was heading toward divorce, I wanted to be prepared. Detective Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to my story without judgment, taking notes as I explained the timeline of Sarah's suspicious behavior. When I showed her the photos I had taken of the house where Sarah spent her afternoons, She nodded grimly. "This is more common than you might think, Mr. Mendoza," she said gently. "Financial stress often reveals the true character of people in a marriage. Some couples grow closer during hard times, while others fall apart completely. From what you're describing, your wife may have been planning this transition for longer than you realize." Within a week, Detective Rodriguez had gathered information that confirmed my worst fears and revealed details that were even more devastating than I had imagined. The man Sarah was seeing was named Richard Patterson, a successful real estate developer who owned multiple properties throughout Arizona. He was divorced, wealthy, and apparently had a history of relationships with married women going through financial difficulties. But the most shocking revelation was that Sarah had been meeting with divorce attorneys for over a month. Detective Rodriguez had documented 3 separate visits to different law firms where my wife had been consulting about asset division, alimony claims, and custody arrangements. She wasn't just having an affair, she was systematically planning to leave me while gathering information about how to maximize her financial benefit from ending our marriage. The investigator also discovered that Sarah had opened a separate bank account that I knew nothing about. Through her surveillance, she had observed Sarah making regular deposits into this account, money that appeared to be coming from Richard Patterson. My wife wasn't just cheating on me emotionally and physically. She was also accepting financial support from her lover, while still living under my roof and pretending to be committed to our marriage. When Detective Rodriguez presented me with her complete report, including photographs, bank records, and attorney consultation schedules, I felt like I was looking at evidence of a crime rather than documentation of my wife's betrayal. The woman I had loved and trusted for 15 years had been calculating and methodical in her deception, covering every angle to ensure her smooth transition from our struggling household to Richard's comfortable lifestyle. That night, I sat in my truck outside our house for nearly an hour before going inside. Isabella was visible through the living room window, working on a school project at the coffee table, while Sarah helped her with research on her laptop. From the outside, we looked like any normal family dealing with the everyday challenges of homework and bedtime routines. No one could have guessed that our entire foundation was built on lies and that our family was about to implode. When I finally walked through the front door, Isabella ran to hug me as she always did. Her innocent joy at seeing her father come home after a long day of work made my chest tighten with emotion. How could I explain to my 12-year-old daughter that her mother had been living a double life? How could I prepare her for the devastation that was about to tear our family apart? Sarah looked up from the laptop with the same warm smile she had been giving me for months, completely unaware that I now knew the truth about everything she had been hiding. "How was your day, mi amor?" she asked, using the term of endearment that now felt like another layer of deception. "It was fine," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Just the usual work. How was your day at the boutique?" She launched into another fabricated story about customers and inventory, speaking with the same convincing details she had perfected over the past several weeks. But now I could see through every word, recognizing the practiced nature of her lies. As she spoke, I found myself studying her face, looking for any sign of guilt or remorse, but finding only the smooth confidence of someone who had become expert at living a double life. After Isabella went to bed that night, I made a decision that required every ounce of courage I possessed. I waited until Sarah was relaxed on the couch, scrolling through her phone, before sitting down beside her with Detective Rodriguez's report hidden behind my back. "Sarah," I said quietly, "we need to talk about something important." She looked up with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "Of course. What's on your mind? I need to ask you a direct question, and I need you to give me an honest answer. Are you having an affair?" For a split second, I saw pure panic flash across her features before she recovered with an expression of hurt confusion. "Carlos, how could you even ask me something like that? After everything we've been through together, how could you think I would do something like that to our family?" Her performance was flawless, complete with tears that appeared right on cue. She reached for my hands, looking directly into my eyes with what seemed like wounded sincerity. "I love you and Isabella more than anything in this world. Yes, things have been difficult lately, but that doesn't mean I would ever betray our marriage. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, if I didn't have photographs and bank records documenting her deception, I might have believed her emotional denial." Sarah had always been good with words, skilled at making people feel guilty for doubting her version of events. But this time, I was prepared for her manipulation. I pulled out Detective Rodriguez's report and placed it on the coffee table between us. The photographs of her with Richard Patterson were clearly visible on top of the stack of documents. Sarah's face went completely white as she stared at the images, her mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. "Who is he?" I asked, pointing to the picture of her embracing Richard outside his expensive home. Sarah's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The tears stopped flowing, the wounded expression disappeared, and something cold and calculating took its place. She straightened her shoulders and looked at me with a defiance I had never seen before. His name is Richard, she said simply, no longer bothering to deny what was obvious. And yes, I've been seeing him. The casual way she admitted to destroying our marriage felt like a slap across the face. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the pain she had caused, just a matter-of-fact confirmation that she had been living a lie for months while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to save our family. For how long? I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answer. Since about 2 months after you lost your job, she replied with the same emotionless tone. I met him at a coffee shop downtown when I was having lunch with Jennifer. He started talking to me and one thing led to another. The timeline meant that Sarah had begun her affair during some of the darkest days of my unemployment, when I was struggling with depression and self-doubt about my ability to provide for my family. While I was questioning my worth as a husband and father, she was already moving on with someone who could offer her immediate financial security. And the divorce attorneys? I continued, flipping through the report to show her the documentation of her legal consultations. Sarah didn't even look surprised that I knew about her secret meetings with lawyers. She had been caught completely, and now she seemed almost relieved to stop pretending. I needed to understand my options, she said with a shrug. I needed to know what I would be entitled to if our marriage ended. The cold calculation in her voice was more painful than anger would have been. This wasn't a woman who had made a mistake in a moment of weakness or confusion. This was someone who had systematically planned the destruction of our family while maintaining the pretense of being a loving wife and mother. What about Isabella? I asked, thinking of our daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that her world was about to change forever. Isabella will be fine, Sarah replied dismissively. Children are resilient, and she'll adapt to having 2 homes. Richard has a beautiful house with a pool and a big yard. She'll probably prefer spending time there once she gets used to the idea. The way she talked about our daughter's future as if it were already decided, as if Isabella's feelings and preferences were irrelevant to her plans, showed me a side of Sarah I had never seen before. This wasn't the woman who had spent hours reading bedtime stories and helping with school projects. This was someone who was willing to uproot our child's entire life for her own convenience and comfort. So what happens now? I asked, feeling emotionally drained from the confrontation. Sarah stood up and smoothed down her clothes, already shifting into a businesslike mode. I'll be moving in with Richard next week. My attorney will be in touch with you about the divorce proceedings and custody arrangements. I think it's best if we handle this as amicably as possible for Isabella's sake. The speed with which she transitioned from denying everything to making practical arrangements for leaving demonstrated just how thoroughly she had planned this betrayal. She had been ready to execute her exit strategy the moment her deception was discovered, showing no hesitation or second thoughts about abandoning the life we had built together. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed in our guest room, as if nothing monumental had just happened between us, I sat alone in the kitchen trying to process the complete destruction of everything I had believed about my marriage. The woman I had loved and trusted for 15 years had revealed herself to be someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of months of calculated deception while I struggled to keep our family together. The financial stress that I had viewed as a temporary challenge to overcome had apparently been the catalyst that exposed Sarah's true priorities. When faced with the choice between standing by me during difficult times or pursuing a more comfortable life with someone else, she had chosen comfort without hesitation. The vows we had exchanged about staying together through richer or poorer had apparently come with conditions I had never understood. As I sat there in the darkness of our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the life we had shared, I realized that losing my job had actually revealed something much more valuable than the income I had lost. It had shown me who Sarah really was beneath the surface, and it had given me the chance to discover this truth before wasting any more years of my life with someone who saw our marriage as a business arrangement rather than a sacred commitment. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my own apartment with Isabella, who splits her time between my place and Richard's mansion. The divorce was finalized last week, and while Sarah got half of what little we had left, I kept my dignity and my relationship with my daughter intact. The construction industry has started to recover, and I'm back to steady work as a site supervisor for a new company that values experience over everything else. Isabella has struggled with the changes, but she's shown the same resilience I've always admired in her. She tells me she prefers our simple dinners together over the fancy restaurants Sarah takes her to with Richard. Sometimes she asks why her mother left, and I tell her that people make choices based on what they think will make them happy, even when those choices hurt the people they're supposed to love most. Looking back, I realize that losing my job wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. It was losing my job that revealed who Sarah truly was beneath the surface. If our financial crisis hadn't occurred, I might have spent decades married to someone who was only committed to me conditionally, someone who saw our relationship as a contract that could be broken whenever better terms became available elsewhere. The betrayal still stings, especially when I think about those months when I was working multiple jobs while she was planning her exit strategy. But I've learned that some people show their true character when times get tough, while others reveal theirs when times get comfortable again. Sarah chose security over loyalty, wealth over commitment, and ease over love. Those were her choices to make, but they were also choices that freed me from a marriage built on false foundations. Today, I'm grateful for the harsh lesson about trust and the importance of finding someone who will stand by you during life's storms, rather than someone who abandons ship at the first sign of rough weather. My daughter and I are building a new life together, one based on honesty, respect, and unconditional love. And that's worth more than any mansion or bank account could ever provide.